So, ladies and gentlemen, good morning from Bonnie, Scotland. I hope you're well wherever you are and wherever you're tuning in today. This is the launch of The Little Iceberg. And some of you may have seen the book already. You'll certainly see plenty of it as we go through the morning. Thank you for joining us from wherever you are. Just a reminder that the hashtag, if you're tweeting about the book and about this broadcast this morning, is The Little Iceberg. And please feel free to use the chat facility on Zoom, because we want to know where you are, what you're doing, and share any stories or anything at all. Just use that chat facility and please interact. Before we meet our guests for this morning on this very special broadcast, I would like to welcome the lady who I work with an awful lot now. I think she's almost my broadcast wife. Don't print that. I would be delighted. I would be honoured to have this lady as my other half, but she is, from a broadcast point of view, my other half. Dr. Suzanne Zedyke, good morning.
Good morning, Gary. It is lovely to see you. It's lovely to know that all these other people have arrived from all over the world. I'm watching that come in by chat. And it is true that over lockdown, you and I and the wider team have managed to pull together what is, for me, a remarkable kind of broadcast from home to give people ways to understand trauma and relationships and attachment. And I have been quite amazed at what we've been able to create, and how every week my backdrop changes and I pretend that I'm in Waterstones as we talk about a new resource. So I'm delighted that we have pulled this off, and it couldn't have happened without you in your gold jacket and a different bow tie every single week.
And can I just say, in the interest of fairness, other bookshops are available.
Indeed.
Oh, well, that's good. Well, let's go around and let's meet our guest for this morning. Nicky Murray. Good morning to you, Nicky.
Morning, Gary. It's a delight to be here. Hello, everybody that's tuning in.
It's great to see you. It's great to see you. I know we've shared a stage previously on different topics, but it's so good to see you. And we'll talk about the book in just a moment. You're a head teacher, and you're the author of the book, which is terrific. And I've got so many questions to ask you. But it's great to see you. And just to put it into context, you're in Bonnie, Scotland as well. Actually, I think you're just down the road from me, aren't you?
That's right. Yeah, I'm just outside Dundee.
Just outside Dundee. It's great to see you, Nicky, and I'll be with you in just a moment.
Thanks,
Sylvia
Gary.
Lynch is the author. Is the illustrator. Nicky is the author. Sylvia is the illustrator. Hello, Sylvia. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Gary.
And where do we join you this morning?
I'm in Northumberland.
Beautiful part of the world. Absolutely beautiful part of the world. Are you in the rolling countryside?
It's quite rural. It's not too rolling where I am, but it's sunny as well. That's nice.
That must be good for your inspiration as an illustrator.
Oh yes, I love the area and many parts of Scotland as well. My favourite places.
Yeah, well, we'll come back to that in just a moment. And Karen Traisman, Dr. Karen Traisman, good morning. How are you?
Hello, hi everyone. I'm good, thank you. Nice to be here and to be invited to be part of this really exciting launch. So yeah.
And in which part of the world are you today?
I'm central London.
Which can be as beautiful?
Yeah, it's very cloudy this morning, but yeah, up and down. But it's been overall, I'm on the 10th floor, so I can see the London Eye right now. So probably a very different view from rolling hills.
Beautiful, very good. I like that. Very good. You should have said, I'm in my penthouse.
I wish.
I'm in the penthouse. It's great to see you, Karen. Thank you for joining us this morning. We'll chat in just a moment. Suzanne, before we speak to Nicky, how long has this project taken? I mean, I said at the start of the broadcast, you can look at a book and take a book off the shelf, and it might engage you. You think it's wonderful. You buy it for yourself. You buy it as a present, but you don't always think about the work that actually has gone in to producing the final book. So, how long has it taken?
Gary, this has been a project 18 months in the making. It's our first children's book. It's our first book with illustrations. Anybody who follows the work of Connected Baby knows that we produce a whole range of resources which are designed to help people to better understand relationships and trauma and attachment and the importance of being able to tune into emotions. But normally we use photographs to do that, and they illustrate almost all of our work. This is the first time that we've had illustrations, and so in order to do that, we set up an illustrator competition, and Sylvia won that competition. That had over 60 people who took part in it. And the amazing thing is, we had no idea when we set that what people were going to do, if they were going to participate, if they would be interested. And so we just make an adventure out of all of this. That started 18 months ago. And then as we'll hear the story of the book. And of course, we would have had it out earlier, but COVID came along. And I've actually come to think that maybe coronavirus is the perfect time to launch a book like this, because so many children will have been coping with separation and loss during that time. And we need to find ways to help them to talk about that. And this book does that.
I've described this as the book that was meant to be. And I mean that, and I hope that materializes itself as we go through this broadcast. So it will piece itself together, but certainly the book that was meant to be, which takes me now to Nicky. Nicky, where did the inspiration for the book come from?
I suppose really it started when I'd actually was sitting watching a documentary with my daughter, and it was about icebergs, and I was thinking about a wee girl that I'd been working with during the week in school, and there was a comment made about icebergs are 7 times larger beneath the surface, and there's a lot hidden beneath, and it got me thinking about the idea of trying to really write a story that had a lot beneath it, a lot of depth to it. Because I'd been experimenting with a wee bit of story writing just for assemblies and telling the children stories and whatnot. And I thought, no, there's something that I can try and communicate with a bit of depth that really kind of captures the essence of the iceberg. And when I started to play around with the idea of writing a story about icebergs, and it took several months trying to refine it, the textures and the colours in icebergs really were communicating to me there's a lot of complexity, which is the same as trauma. There's a lot of complexity and there's a lot of vulnerability there that's actually hidden in plain sight. So that's kind of what I started to think along the lines of in terms of the iceberg. The little bird, I mean, I could have chosen anything in terms of the interaction between the iceberg and another character, but the bird, in terms of scale, was so small, yet it had a massive impact, and it was only by it constantly chipping away, little touches, tiny touches, staying connected, that I thought that's the message I want to communicate. It's all about these tiny little moments that you give to people and you share with people that's really important. So that's where the idea came from with the little bird and the iceberg.
It is. I mean, it's multi-layered, the book, and I've always got to put out a disclaimer and say I don't have children, so I don't have it, but I can really see the appeal to parents. So it acts as a story for children, but actually where I think the genius of this book is that it acts on different layers, and we'll come on to the companion guide to the Little Iceberg, which comes with the book as well. So it's a fantastic story. I'm delighted to hear that it came from some inspiration when you were sat with your daughter, and it was just one of those. It's amazing where these ideas come from. What happened after that? I mean, first of all, how long did it take for you to write the book? So I'm not talking about designing and everything. Was it an organic process?
Yeah, it was quite organic in as much as I was able to draw on all my experiences in school and start to think about what I knew about grounding, which was to do with obviously the little bit of the leaf and the twig that was left, about breath and the importance of breath. So everything that I was applying in my normal school life, I tried to embed within the story, but it really just flowed naturally. It wasn't really contrived in terms of, I'm going to try and re-engineer this page to ensure it's got a bit about, grounding or breath or connection. No, it was really quite fluid in terms of the way I was writing it. So I wanted it to stand as a story in itself, but also to communicate all that I knew about trauma and supporting and healing and helping people recover within it. So it was pretty organic. It's pretty fluid. Yeah.
And then Suzanne, you were working with Nicky in his school, and then the connection came around. Then I take it, so that's when you found out about the story.
Yep. So Nicky and I were working together, helping to bring more trauma awareness to his staff. And he said that he had written this story and had been reading it to the children in assembly and had begun to wonder, could he get it published? And as we talked about the range of people who publish children's work, I just said, well, we could work together to publish it. And Connected Baby doesn't yet have a children's book. And so it just grew organically. The whole process has been organic. That's a good way to describe it, Gary. Nicky, that's a good way to describe it. That it just, maybe that fits in, Gary, with your idea that it's the book that was meant to be, because we are beyond proud to have this now amongst the set of resources that we can offer to the public.
So one of the things that happened next, Suzanne, on the story of this remarkable book was that you ran a competition to look for an illustrator, and that's how the relationship with Sylvia came about. Is that right? So before we go to Sylvia, what sort of response did you get to the competition that you ran?
We had more than 60 people with an age range from, in fact, the youngest who submitted was about 6. All the way up to Sylvia is at the other end of the age range. We didn't know that at the time. We didn't know anything about that at the time. And then we had a short list, and on that short list we had someone who was 14. So I give that story to give a sense of the wide range of people who were interested in in communicating messages to children and their families. And so now it makes sense to me that Sylvia won, because she's done nature all her life. That is her focus in her art. And then, so I think that just resonated kind of at the spirit of level to this book.
So Sylvia, if I can come to you, what attracted you to this project? Why did you decide to put pen to paper, as it were, and start on this journey? What appealed to you?
Well, initially it was quite by chance that I came across it. And in fact, a writer friend emailed me with the details, and it was a sort of spontaneous thing with me. I think Suzanne had asked for images, or Brett had asked for images to be sent in, and I did that. And my thing, as Suzanne has said, is mainly to do with nature. People and animals are my subjects. And then I was given a snippet of Nicky's story, which intrigued me, it just went from there, really. And I've just found it a fascinating process. It's been a delight.
You are a highly talented lady.
Well, that's very kind of you to say.
It's not kind, it's the truth. You're a highly talented lady. This when I first saw this book, and I remember seeing it for the first time before lockdown, because Suzanne and I were having a cup of coffee, and she took something out of her bag and said, "What do you think of this?" And it wasn't hard book back at the time. It was very much almost like a prototype, if you like. That's a terrible word to use, isn't it? But I do you know what? From the moment I saw it, I absolutely fell in love with it. And I have always felt that this could be, for people of a certain generation, the new Snowman. And I want to read a little bit out of this. So your illustrations and Nicky's words and Nicky's imagination just it is the book that was meant to be, and we'll come on to more of that in just a moment. Karen, if I could come to you in central London, that was my first reaction when I saw the book, and I didn't even think about the companion guide to The Little Iceberg, Making Sense of Trauma. I was just looking at it from a children's book point of view and thought it was fantastic. What was your first reaction?
I think a similar reaction to you. Suzanne emailed me the book, and the first thing I saw was the illustrations, and I thought they are absolutely stunning and really quite mesmerizing, actually. And they were so soothing and calming and containing. So I'm a very sort of artistic visual person, so I absolutely loved the illustrations. Then I saw it was by Nicky, who does amazing work in his school, and you know, has been an incredible advocate for trauma. And then I started reading it and was just so moved, kind of what Nicky said about how many layers are in there, from hope to thinking of kindness, compassion, those children who might retreat or block away. So there were so many different themes of persistence, determination, that it just felt really multi-layered. So and beautifully metaphoric. It is enough distance that it's not triggering for children, but allows to open up and be a springboard for further discussion. And I also thought, as I was reading it, which I think I said to Suzanne, I thought it had massive appeal for adults as well. I don't just think it's a book for children. I think it's a beautiful work for inner child work for adults as well, to connect with some of their own life experiences and feelings. So yeah, I thought it was a gorgeous book, and says a huge amount, not just about trauma, but about pain, hurt, stress, disconnection. Yeah.
And Karen, you're an author yourself, you know, of similar books. So we're absolutely privileged to have you here, incidentally. So you know, you're talking from authority, which is a position of authority, which is terrific. Where do you think this book fits into the other books that are available and out there? Is it different? Is it complementary? Where do you think, in your experience, it fits in?
Yeah, I think it's, I certainly have, and I know how much heart and work goes into it. And as you were saying at the beginning, the team, it's very much a team effort. I'm actually, as we speak this afternoon, working on my next one, which is my 10th. So yeah, very much put a lot into it. I think every book has a beautiful appeal. And I think if you just kind of look at the front cover, it is beautiful and unique, and it's got Nicky's and Sylvia and Suzanne's flair and appeal into it. I think it certainly fits into the trauma range of children's books, particularly those children who might have hardened their hearts and find it quite hard to let people close to them, those children who might have put up a wall around them or to put up prickles to keep people away, those children who might dissociate or fly away. So I think it's certainly got a beautiful place in the wider trauma world. It goes really amazingly with my Cleo the Croc book. I'm actually going to use them together in therapy on Tuesday. But as I said, I also think it's not just about trauma. I think, you know, it would appeal to all children about compassion, kindness, connection, relationship. So I think it's got a really wide appeal. And I think trauma and stress and adversity is something that touches all of us in different ways. So it's got a huge reach, and it's a really important book.
When you were talking there about what children think of it, we've actually got a review on the back from Callum, age 9. I don't know whether Callum's with us this morning. I hope he is. Callum, good morning to you if you are. I love your quotes. The rating I gave this book is infinity out of infinity. You feel safe when you see the rainbow. I thought that was absolutely perfect. Nicky, when you hear that from Callum, age 9, what does it make you feel or think?
Yeah, it's. I read that and I was actually a bit emotional about that, because that's the whole point, that I want children to enjoy it. But as Karen says, also it's trying to make sure that it appeals to adults too, as a source of comfort. And when I was writing the story, I felt it's really it's really important to honour the good work that goes on across the whole of all the different sectors and professions where people really need courage, people need compassion, and hope is one of those themes that come through the book, where it's basically about just, fully seeing, fully hearing the child at every opportunity, but also recognising that you do need support to keep doing that good work. And that's where there's a little bit in the book where the iceberg has a relay and a rupture, and then flies away and meets a friend and has a bit of courage, and then comes back again. And so the bird's refreshed and then starts to work again. So it's really important to communicate that working with children and families and working on yourself as well requires courage and compassion. So that was the idea behind it.
It's really interesting. You thought we'd have rehearsed this, but actually that's one of my favourite parts of it. I'm just going to read it in just a second. So the bit you've just quoted there, so may I just read this a little bit? So here we go. I hope I do this justice, by the way. I have been practicing. Every morning, the little bird would arrive and pause for a moment. She would listen to the creaks and groans of the iceberg. This must be a very clever bird, thought the iceberg. How do you know where to start each day, little bird? The bird cocked her tiny head to one side and replied, I listen. One day, a big piece of ice fell off and nearly crushed the little bird. She flew away and didn't come back all the rest of that day. The iceberg was very sad. Where did you go? She asked the next day. I went to find my friend, said the little bird without lifting her head. What's your friend called? Courage, replied the little bird, and kept pecking. So that's it. I think it's right. And one of the things I thought about when I was reading this, I've read it a few times now, is that I think before parents or guardians or adults read this out loud to little people, I think they should read it themselves first, without going in head first. And it's just wonderful. I'm going to come to Brett in a moment, who designed the book. Suzanne, what do you? I mean, gosh, this must be overwhelming. I do want to talk to you about how this part of the book came about as well, the companion guide to the Little Iceberg, because this is, for me, a stroke of genius. So it's gone from what I believe gone from a children's book to this guide, and I've never seen this before in a book. So how did this part of the book come about, Suzanne?
Gary, it's a great question, and I love the idea that it's both a children's book and not a children's book. And it's not a children's book because, as Karen says, it appeals to the inner child. I go back and read classic children's books that I love, and that's because they're not just a child's book, whatever that means, just. It's because it speaks to really deep human emotions, and that's why they become classic. So Where the Wild Things Are is a story about a little boy who's mad at his mother, and he goes off on an adventure and he talks to all the monsters because he's mad at his mother. That is why that has become a classic. Okay, if this becomes a classic book, I'd be delighted. Wrote the guide because we wanted to be sure that people didn't miss some of the help that was in the book. So the book is intentionally metaphoric. That's why Nicky wrote the story. A metaphor helps you think about painful emotions without getting them too close, without making them too invasive, without making them overwhelming. We can talk about the iceberg. We can talk about somebody else. We can talk about her friend, the little bird, and we can explore what those feelings might have been like for her. And that's easier to talk about somebody else than it is to talk about your own feelings. And every single adult knows that. All of us know that it's easier to tell our friends how to solve their problems than it is to figure out how to solve our own. It's always easier to see things in other people than it is in yourself. And so hopefully that will be the case for children, that it will be easier for them to talk about the little iceberg than some of the things that they have experienced, including during COVID. And at the same time, we didn't want the adults to miss all of the lovely layers in the book. So putting together the companion guide was just a way to help people to do that. And Brett, who we're going to meet in a minute, had the great idea of we would take each page spread and then map the insights on those pages to those pictures. And so rather than explore like the themes that the book explores, we could literally map it onto the illustrations. And we hope that works. And then we decided that once you knew that, you might like to know a little bit about the science behind the book. So all of the characters in the story all live in the Arctic. So they're all, very real for that setting. It helps us to think about climate change. Maybe we can come back to that. So we just decided to put together a guide that would really help us all to think about what's underneath the story and how you can use it as a resource. And if I can say one more thing, Gary, you read that beautifully.
Oh, thank you.
And I love that, although the story says the iceberg felt sad, but Gary, you read that in a way where the iceberg was angry. Where did you go? What's the name of your bird? Very often what we see is anger. That's the way the behavior presents. But underneath it is sadness. And so you could read this book in all sorts of different ways to capture feelings. And the whole point of the trauma movement for me is that if we can be more interested in children's feelings and in other grown-ups' feelings and in our own feelings, then we will help ourselves. And actually that will help us to make sense of the behavior that we often see too. And we're going to need to know that as we come out of lockdown for COVID.
Thanks, Suzanne. So where I'll come to you in a second, Nicky. Sorry, no, in fact, I'll come to you now, Nicky. Come to you now.
Yeah, just on the point that Suzanne was making there, I think the first few pages of the book, there's a bit that talks about the icebergs, lots of different shapes and sizes of icebergs in the ocean, and no one pays much attention. And that for me was really important, to communicate the fact that in any given day I can be walking past hundreds of children in school, and I try and make sure that I try and connect and say hello and have a little discussion or reach out with them every time I walk past anyone. And sometimes that's enough just to have a conversation with a child. But you've got to be really paying attention, which brings in the idea of attunement as well, about being attuned to the child. So I think the way of just trying to ensure that you're curious, as Suzanne's talking about, but actually just being attentive and just making sure that you're paying attention to what's going on around you if you're working with children or working with families. So yeah, I just thought I'd add that.
No,
Can I
good.
actually come back in, Gary? That's really important what you just said, Nicky, because lots of people can think that working with trauma has to be a big deal and you have to have a big program and you have to do big things, and you don't. The point of this book for me is that the bird is steady. She does little tiny things against a big problem that is often hidden with the iceberg underneath the surface. So just to back up what Nicky has said, just being present, just tuning in, just knowing when to drop the tone of your voice, giving attention is in itself therapeutic. And if people knew that, I think we would relax about what to do. Schools could relax, teachers could relax. We could just be present with people. And sometimes they'll need more than that. But being present helps, it works, and it often doesn't seem big enough. And at the same time, actually just being present is in itself often hard.
Brett, I'll come to you in just a moment. Sorry, Susan.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Can I go to Karen based on that? Because I think this is very much your area as well. Based on what Nicky and Suzanne have said there, what would you like to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think they've said it beautifully. I think just to add and sort of tie what they were both saying together, I think, I've got a quote that often gets tweeted that is, every interaction is an intervention. And I think it's that every moment can be a light bulb moment, can be a sparkle moment. It can be a plant seeded, it can be a ripple. And I think that's so much of what this book is about giving that relational moment and about doing it in a way that's distancing. But I think what Suzanne's talking to is what's so important, that we don't just see behaviour, that we see the child behind the behaviour. And curiosity is that key. How can you be curious, not furious? And I think, the anger, as you read it, And I think that very much mirrors what Suzanne says, that anger is a bodyguard emotion, it's a mask emotion, it's a camouflage emotion. So what this book is trying to do is open up with a way to talk about feelings, but also to talk about relationships, that it's okay to ask for help, that it's okay to show some vulnerability. And I think those are some really key messages that we can share with children, that we're in this together. And I think at the moment what children need is, who are your life inspirers, who are your safety net? And this little bird shows that you can sort of make sometimes the small things are the big things.
That's great. I think,
Gary, can I come back in? I know, there's so many interesting things in this discussion to have. And if we only have an hour, what do you point out? One of the things I want to emphasize is that for lots of the people who've come today, and I can see, them coming up in the chat, and we had, heading toward 300 signed up this morning. So a lot of people want to know about this. And for people who get it, this seems obvious. But I want to stress, we are in the middle of a big debate in the country at the moment. This is not obvious to everyone. So just yesterday, the Times Educational Supplement published an article that was on its front page, and that's an educational magazine for anybody who doesn't know, published a piece that's talking about the debate around trauma-informed approaches and how adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, gets wrapped into that. And the point of that piece was to raise a debate about whether or not this is schools' responsibilities, and whether this is too much for schools, and whether all interventions are therapeutic, as you just said, Karen, or whether actually that's not the business of teachers. So one of the exciting and slightly edgy parts of this, and I like edgy, anybody who watches my stuff knows that I like to do the difficult conversations. One of the difficult conversations we are having as a country at the moment is, do all schools need to be trauma informed or not? And what would that mean? And who would decide? And what would the training for that be? What would it look like? Well, Nicky, that's why Nicky is great at speaking to this, because he just decided he wanted to get himself informed on this. And I just decided I wanted to reach the public. And Karen just decided that she knew stuff that would be relevant to people, and she went about figuring out how to do that. So anybody can just decide that they want to know more about this, that they want to talk about this book, that they want to bring this back to their schools. It needs people to get informed and to make decisions about what they think about the importance of listening to emotions and human relationships. And it needs every single one of us to be part of that conversation. You don't have to agree with me, but you need to know what you think so that you can have an informed view. Our country needs to have this debate, because at the moment, tons of children have adults who just pay attention to their behavior, and they often get punished for that, and we make it worse without ever meaning to. If this book helps us one more step along the way to think about that, I will be delighted.
Can I just go back to Nicky? I know that, Nicky, you want to talk about the importance of this book in the planning of schools and for schools when schools eventually go back. And I think it's a good time to make that point. But were you wanting to say something else before then?
Yeah, it was really just to build on what Suzanne was saying, and about the idea of the tiny little touches, if you like, and adjustments and little things that you can do each day. So coming into a new school in the middle of the pandemic is obviously going to be quite a challenging feat. So one of the things that we did as a team was decide, how can we actually bear in mind the public health direction and instruction and guidance, but also to try and soften the environment. So my goal for the school was to create the right environment and the right experience for the children coming back. And one of the things that we've actually done, which is very subtle and small, is we've made sure that every room has taken all the wallpapering down that is usually a traditional classroom wall, all the different signage and so on. And we've surrounded it by natural wallpaper friezes, which are either beaches or mountains or forests or wispy clouds, something so that the child comes in and it takes the edge off the classroom feel, so it softens it a little bit. And then we looked at the traditional way of seating the children, and obviously we have to make sure that there's space because of the guidance. And we've actually come up with a way which is really like, you're calling it a helicopter, where the children are in groups of 4, but they're all facing one another, as opposed to the traditional interpretation of the guidance, which is put them in rows. So it's little subtle changes that we've started to think about in terms of making sure that we're making the best possible adaptations where we can. And just before the summer, all the children in the school, and I think, Gary, there's about 383 of them, every single child is going to be gifted a calm box or a calming box. And in that box, we put a lot of thought into it. So there's bubbles for breath, and every child's going to receive a teddy. There are Play-Doh, worry dolls, sensory toys, mindfulness colouring in activities, everything to do with starting to get them comfortable this summer with trying and experimenting with regulation. And when they come back, we've actually got a curriculum now which is called Trust in Me Learning, which is about the relationship and also your relationship with yourself and others. And from that trust in me stands for time. So I've asked all the staff to organise their day around time to learn, time to regulate, time to play, time to think, time to grow. And within each of these headings and ways and parts of the day, the child will be able to start to develop strategies and methods and routines that will hopefully support the child to regulate and connect and recover from what has been a horrendous experience in terms of the pandemic. So yeah, schools, I think, from being a leader of the school, I think schools just need permission and they need insight. And once they see people starting to try and experiment and be curious, as Suzanne talks about, then it gives people permission to try and do the same type of thing. So I think that's what we need. We need all to keep talking, keep communicating, and try and think about how can we support the children and the families by ensuring it's the best possible experience and environment.
We're getting some great messages coming through on what you've just said there, Nicky, and quite rightly so. Let's go back to the book for just a moment. The Little Iceberg. Where do you see the Little Iceberg fitting in to what you've just spoken about in terms of getting young people back into school? You've spoken eloquently, that great idea, the physical environment. Where does the book fit into this?
Well, when I was thinking about the school itself, I used to work in the school in Perth, and it was a fantastic experience for me. And they had 2 values, which were courage and compassion. And every single interaction and every single activity and all the learning was reflected through those 2 values, courage and compassion. And I think the messages within the book lend itself to allowing children and the teachers to map some of the ideas from the book onto the school aims and values. So to give an example, in our school in Clayports Castle in Douglas, our school values are trust, respect, responsibility, fairness and care. Now, what fantastic values. And so when I was talking to staff, I said, when the children come back, just choose some learning that naturally maps on and allows you every opportunity to talk and connect with those values of trust, responsibility, respect, fairness and care. And the book and literature and art allows people to make those connections. So I think the book will be really powerful as a platform for people to explore the storyline, but also to start connecting the school values with it, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does. Karen, when I hear Nicky talking, and I'm going to ask Suzanne the same question as well, why on earth do we have a debate going on about trauma-informed schools? I mean, sorry, what's going on?
I think obviously I kind of believe it with my heart, soul, everything that I breathe. But I think what we come across is when there's something new, people feel that anything new can feel scary, overwhelming, threatening to what they've been doing for so many years before. It can feel that people might have to get in touch with their own experiences. People can feel overwhelmed and out of depth. I think a lot of places people are functioning in very traumatized systems, and so it can be really hard to think. It can be really hard to reflect, and I think sometimes people like to stay in a particular comfort zone. So I think there's lots and lots of complexities and we'd need much more time, but I think often people, when they're putting up like that, it's a sense of they're apprehensive. And I suppose I always say we need to understand why fences and honour why fences have been put up before we try and take them down. But I think there's lots of misconceptions about trauma, what it is, what it means. I think a lot of schools, for example, think, well, we've only got 3 children in foster care, so why does this relate to me? As opposed to realising that we've got not just trauma, but thinking about cultural trauma. Look at what's going on with Black Lives Matter, racial trauma, intergenerational, community, medical and health trauma, single event trauma, so that it's the whole gamut. And I think the idea that people sort of lose of that is, there's a quote by Alexander Van Hyger which says, if a flower doesn't bloom, you don't try and fix the flower, you change the environment in which it grows. And I think some people think it just applies to a few people, so that's not me, or it's only for therapists. But the thing is, you don't have to be a therapist to be therapeutic. You do need to be a therapist to do therapy. And I think there's a lot of knowledge sharing and understanding that needs to happen, that people can get a sense of, how does this relate to me and why is it relevant? People need a hook. Why is this important? And I think it's important that it doesn't become a buzzword or the sexy word. And I think some schools have got understandably frustrated with it being overused, that it comes with a context of understanding the neuroscience behind it, of understanding around sensory processing, around emotional regulation. If you understand the why and you've got your elevator speech, it's much, much easier to communicate and share that for other people. But I think it can be a hard concept, even more so when you're in stretched, under-resourced environments. And people like simplicity. And unfortunately, trauma-informed can be multi-layered and complex. And that, therefore, is tricky. I could go on and on, but I'll be quiet.
No, that's great, Karen. Brett, I promise I am going to come to you next. I promise. Because I want to pick back up on the book. But Suzanne, I'd love you to pick up on just on what Karen's just said there, and probably my naive statement of why is there this trauma-informed schools debate going on?
Gary, it's not naive at all. It's a really important question. To add to everything Karen just said, I think that one of the reasons people are, I'm just going to use the word resistant to this, is because it means we have to do a bit more work as human beings. We have to get curious about other people. We can't just give in to our frustration or our anger or our existing beliefs. So, and that's hard, right? So I have spoken to kinship carers over this time of COVID. And there are children who've broken all the windows in the flat where they're staying, because they have a whole background of trauma. It's hard to be interested in aggressive behavior of breaking windows when that's going to cost you money and when that put you at risk. It's hard to shift into curiosity. And so, and the fact that anybody is willing to do it, I think is celebratory. It also helps me to think about the people who are not willing to do that. And if you work in a school that has encouraged you to not shift into curiosity, and that is picked up in that piece yesterday from Tez, then you have reason to not do that extra work. So every single person who chooses to get curious about themselves, who chooses to help other people to get curious and find ways to do that, is furthering an important cultural conversation that we are having.
Okay, thank you for that.
I celebrate that, and it helps us to understand why it's a struggle for other people.
Nope, perfect, absolutely perfect. Let's go back to this for just a moment or two. This is the book, of course. Brett, you're part of the Connected Baby team, and you had an extremely important job to do, and you put it all together in terms of the design. I mean, where do you start with such a beautiful book, a work of art?
Well, we had the story, and we had the illustrations. The next thing was the font. That really was the most important thing. I've got hundreds and hundreds of fonts. I went through the lot, and there still wasn't the right one. So I had to search on the internet. Eventually found this font, which is called McQueen, which I really liked. It was friendly, it was approachable, and it wasn't authoritative. It was anyway. The only thing about it was that every punctuation mark was so small. I had to magnify every punctuation mark, so every full stop, everything in there has been completely changed. But yeah, so after the font, it was then a matter of matching the text with the pictures and managing to lay them out so that then the text didn't interfere with the pictures and they complemented each other.
And how did you and Sylvia work with each other?
Well, if there was something in the illustrations, I would get back to Sylvia and say, could you do this or could you do that? So it was very much Sylvia's patience with us, because this is the first book we've done and it's the first time we've worked this way. Sylvia's taught us quite a bit, and it was her patience that actually allowed her to do this. But yeah, we had to do a bit of coming backwards and forwards in order to get the illustrations, everything right.
Don't go away, Brett. Sylvia, if I can come to you, did the I'm trying to what's the way to approach this question. You know, when you start drawing and you make these beautiful illustrations, do you start with the end in mind? So did the final book match your expectations that you had at the start, if that makes sense?
Yes, it did. It did. I right at the beginning, I didn't have Nicky's full story. It was just a snippet. But when I did have it, I started drawing the whole thing out in my head. Well, on an iPad actually, and you know, Brett and I then had this conversation. Well, we emailed one another with thoughts and ideas about how it should go. And I didn't have any communication actually with Nicky, very little, but I heard on the grapevine that he liked how it was going. So that was okay with me.
That's always good to get a thumbs up from the author, isn't it?
Oh, definitely, yeah. Yeah, so actually, despite the fact that it was all done at a distance, which it was, I thought it went fairly smoothly, really, considering the difficulties that might have arisen. And, you know, I was doing a bit of travelling at the time and preoccupied with things. So the way I was doing it was, I did it digitally, and that seemed to work quite well. I just want to say, can I just say something here? I had a message from my daughter to say my grandchildren were watching. So I just want to say hello to them. Hello.
What are their names?
The eldest is Seamus, then Callum, then Hazel and Mikey, who are twins.
Good morning.
The twins may not be interested any longer, but Seamus was asking when Grandma's coming on.
Suzanne.
So here I am.
You know, I love all of that little conversation that we just had there. I love it because it helps to make the creation of books real. Okay, so Brett's description of he had to look really hard to find a font that would tell this story. Sylvia's story of she was doing this while she was traveling and that her grandchildren are watching this morning. When you get a finished product, if it's or a finished training or a finished television program or a finished anything, if it looks beautiful and smooth and there's no problems, you think it just arrived that way. It's like ice skating. When ice skating looks beautiful, you think they just did that with no effort at all. But behind the scenes, there's a whole iceberg of effort, right? They fell, they broke their knees, they did. There's all sorts of decisions that go into creating a book, all the way down to the font. And so if that helps people to be more curious about how we create resources, that helps all of us to think, how do we get this information out to people? So I love that part of the story has come out of this morning.
The other part as well, Suzanne, I think we need to, acknowledge the rest of the team. Pete on the Connected Baby team did a lot of background research as well, didn't he, to make sure that the accuracy of what we were writing about, what Nicky was writing about, what Sylvia was illustrating was absolutely accurate. So even down to the color of icebergs, is that right?
The color of iceberg. And can I just say, I came in glittery blue iceberg jacket this morning. I just want to say that as I was choosing this jacket. Pete wanted to make sure that the bird lived in the Arctic. So the bird is a snow bunting. They live in the Arctic. They live on ice. So we wanted to make sure that as a team, everything we were putting into this book held together. And in that rate, can I also just say all the people who came in to give us reviews that are on the back of the trauma guide. So that's Hazel and Andy parents. That's Dad's Rock. That's Renee Clark, who's a counselor. That's Deborah McAllister, who's a teacher. We wanted to make this real people, real stories, so that it wasn't out there. It's part of the debate we're all having. And that's what will make it work, is that big story.
I know that there's Karen on the Connected Baby team who works remotely. That's been doing a lot of work, and Caitlin, who's looking after Twitter this morning.
She is.
As well.
Good morning, Caitlin.
Good morning. Before we move on, and it always amazes me, Suzanne, how quickly this hour goes. Talk to me about STEM with Mr. N, please.
We wanted to help children to have a way in the run-up to this event, to this launch, to feel really involved. So another of our partnerships, we teamed up with Stuart Naismith, who is a science teacher at one of the primary schools in Scotland. And he started doing what he calls STEM with Mr. N, i.e. science. So gravity, solar ovens, surface tension. And he's been producing a video of that every week during lockdown. He'd never done it before. I love his creativity. So we teamed up with him, and this week we've had an iceberg challenge where he's talked about how icebergs are created, how they melt, why that is causing the difficulty of climate change, which is a trauma to our Earth that we are causing. We are not listening closely enough to our Earth. Greta Thunberg was on the radio this morning, and so she makes us think about how are we creating trauma for the Earth. So Stuart put together STEM with Mr. N, and we've had all sorts of children this week doing scientific experiments that help them to understand how ice melts. And we have had 12 of them who have submitted the outcomes of their work, and their names are all in my hat. And whenever you tell me, Gary, we're going to draw a name so that they get a copy of the book. But I just love that there are children around the country who have been participating in today's launch in creative ways. And one of the key messages that I have taken from that is that every single child who did send us an entry did so because an adult helped them to take part. And so it's just a way of celebrating relationships, and relationships role in learning. So everybody who sent us a picture, thank you to the adults who helped them to do that.
Well, let's draw it in just a second.
Okay.
I've got to say, while I've been reviewing the Twitter feed this week on the lead up to this, one of the happiest photographs I saw on Twitter was a young man called Noah. Does that ring a bell? And I don't know whether the rest of the team saw this, but he was the happiest young man I've ever seen. And I think he produce a video for this as well?
Noah produced a video with his mom's help to look at how icebergs melt, and he's 7. And so the idea that a 7-year-old, lots of people go, well, what can you do at 7? You can do tons at 7. You can also be really hurt at 7. So thinking about the power of relationships from before birth all the way through life, Noah was able to do that because he has a really engaged mom who said to me, homeschooling during lockdown has been hard, but we've embraced it. And clearly Noah is thriving with it. So hello to Noah's mom if you're here too.
Okay, well, let's find out who is the lucky winner of one of these beautiful books.
Who is the winner of the book? And the winner is Ella, who's 13. Ella, who's 13. And I think she was really assisted by Joanne Hogan, who I think is here this morning. So Joanne, maybe you can tell Ella that we will get her address and send her a copy of the book. Can I say that Joanne works with Emotion Works, and Emotion Works is one of the many programs in Scotland that helps adults to be more in tune with children's feelings. And Joanne has been running supportive events throughout lockdown to be with their children. So this is a story of how lots of people are working together.
It is well done.
Well done, Ella.
Well done to everybody who took part, and thank you for all your efforts. And thank you, Mr. Naismith, as well. Thank you for
you're here,
being
Stuart.
so innovative. Okay, we're just going to we're going to wrap up fairly shortly, and there's a couple of things that I want to touch on. Karen, if I could come to you, you've endorsed the book. It's a wonderful endorsement. Thank you very much indeed for that. What would you say to people who are watching this morning, and we know we have quite a few, what would you say to them to encourage them to get this book either for themselves personally or indeed for their schools?
Yeah, I think to me, stories are magic. One of my favourite things to do with children is to read. I think that we know that having conversations sometimes can feel quite exposing and quite tricky. And so to have something that's imaginative and creative and playful, and where we can look and have attention together at the pictures and change our voice and make it a calming place, I think there's something really special about a story. And as we've said a few times, it creates that distance. So I think for people out there who are looking for a story to open up conversations about hope, about compassion, about kindness, about relationships, children, for all children, but children who might be struggling, who have been hurt, or children who have been finding this pandemic very difficult, that it will open up a huge amount of discussions in a playful way with gorgeous illustrations. I don't think there's any disadvantages to having it. I think it'll certainly bring a sparkle moment. I read it last night over FaceTime to my two nephews, and they wanted it 4 times. So it's quite a long book, and for them to want it 4 times, and the little one wanted to know where the bird was in each page, and I'm sure when I get off the phone and call them again today for my daily puppet show, they'll be saying again, where's the iceberg book? So yeah, it's definitely one. But and I'll be using it a lot in my therapeutic interventions as well. So,
Susanna, on that, there have been a number of different interpretations from children that have either read the book or they've had the book read to them, and their imagination has gone in different directions. And I think there was one person who read it, one young person that read it, that saw mermaids at the end. Is that right?
It's absolutely true. I love that already children are bringing their own interpretations to the drawings that Sylvia did. So this page, we had a child who tweeted yesterday with the help of her mother, I like when the iceberg turned into a mermaid. She's seen a mermaid in that page. I hadn't seen that. Maybe Sylvia had seen that, but it means that children bring their own readings to this. And if I give one more example, the very next page, that's the last page. I hope I'm not giving away any spoilers. So there's beautiful, bright colors. And that's new in the book because up till then it had been blue. When Callum reviewed it, hello Callum, I know you're here. Callum said, when you see the rainbow, you feel safe. Well, part of the reason is because we've been talking about rainbows in all our windows. So it turns out that Sylvia's drawings have more relevance to children's experiences than they would have had when the book started. I think that's celebratory.
So Sylvia, when you hear that feedback from young people themselves, how do you feel?
I feel that's just how I wanted it to be. And actually, Brett and I tried not to be too mermaid-like, but if that's how it's turned out, that's okay with me. Hope it's all right with you, Nicky. But yeah, rainbows are always relevant, and particularly so at the moment, I think.
And Brett, what about you? You played a massive part in the team in terms of putting it together. You know, when you hear feedback like that firsthand from the people who the book is designed to entertain and help, what did it make you think and feel?
Well, I've been looking at some of the messages coming in, and I can't help but keep filling up. It's just so wonderful that people are taking it in this way. And a lot of us who do this work, we come to it through our own personal trauma, which is why we do this work. And it's just so gratifying. It really is.
And Nicky, it's only fitting that the final word goes to you this morning, because it wouldn't have happened. This book wouldn't have happened without you putting pen to paper, with you sitting on the couch with your daughter, and here you are. However long it's taken, 18 months, 2 years. I'm not aware of how long it's taken you to get to this point, but how are you feeling? And of course, secondly, is there another book inside you?
Yeah, there's plenty of stories within me, and actually we have already started talking about how the book or the storyline might progress. But I think one of the key points of what you were discussing about the rainbows, and one of the big things in our little village is that we wander around and all the children look at all the other children who are drawing little pictures of rainbows about the storm will pass, and it gives that sense of belonging, but it also gives that sense of really comfort and a community feel around it when we're just walking around the village on our daily exercises. So when I started at the school, we thought if we put the little teddy in the cam box and it's gifted to the 300 odd families, what we're also asking the families to do is to put a teddy in their upstairs window of their house, so that when all the children across the summer are walking around the neighbourhood, they're seeing these teddies, which gives them that sense of belonging, that sense of community, and they're surrounded by teddies in the windows. And that was just building on the idea with Sylvia and the rainbow, and obviously the NHS, and paying homage to the fantastic bravery and courage of all public sector workers who are serving the community at this difficult time. So yeah, the rainbows matter. Rainbows matter a lot.
Wonderful. It's been great speaking to you again, Nicky. We've had lots of great comments, certainly about some of the ideas that you're bringing to life in the school. So many, many congratulations. And I trust that you're very proud of your work. And I'm sure, Suzanne, you're very proud of everybody's work, because it has been truly a team effort to get this book out there. Where can we get the book? That is the question of the morning.
Oh, Gary, that is a great question. You get the book from our website. That's connectedbaby.net. And you can go straight to the website. It tells you about events that we're hosting. It shows you resources. And the little iceberg, there's a picture of the little iceberg right there, and you click on it. Pete and Karen will then do all the admin and put the book in the post to you. And I say that because even the shipping of the book is part of this story that we've been telling this morning. Karen processes the labels, and Pete puts them in envelopes and takes them to the post. And so that helps it to be real. So Callum mother has put in the chat box this morning, they don't have their copy yet. It's in the post somewhere because Pete sent me a picture when he put Callum's book in the post. The back of the guide talks about other resources that are out there that you can get. We wanted to make this part of that wider discussion. Somebody has to put every single one of those resources into the post. So the way that we make a difference to the world with this is by all of us choosing to do that. And so this is our contribution. You get it from our website. We've chosen not to put it on Amazon because Amazon takes a large proportion of the profits. I know lots of people get their things from Amazon these days, but in this case, we've chosen not to do this because that adds to the income to us. And in fact, I wanted to be sure that we could end with the story of what Nicky wants to do with his proportion of the profits, because it helps to think about where we all send our money. So Nicky, do you want to tell people what you're doing with your share of the profits from this book?
Yeah, so a short while ago, one of my my oldest daughter, who's 7 years old, one of her very good friends who had been around the house a lot playing in the back garden and so on, had been suffering with cancer and tragically passed away very recently. So again, we've been talking, my daughter and I, and we'd be donating every penny that I would get from the book to Nine Wells Hospital and the Children's Ward. We just felt that was the right thing to do to honour her memory. And the book has actually helped in terms of talking my daughter through some of the big feelings that she's had and questions. So I felt it was just right to do that. So that's why it's so important that for me that this book goes and goes to a wider audience, because I think I wrote it because I wanted to help people, but also by buying the book, hopefully you'll be helping people too. So.
Great way to finish the broadcast this morning. I want to thank our guests, Nicky, to Brett, to Sylvia, and to Karen, but also to the rest of the Connected Baby team who are instrumental in putting this together. Here it is. And as I said, this is definitely the book that was meant to be, The Little Iceberg. It's out now. Suzanne, thank you very much indeed. Well done to you and your team. And let's just finish by raising a glass and launch the book officially right here on this Saturday morning or evening or afternoon or wherever you may be, whatever time zone you're watching this. Many, many congratulations. And here's to the animation version of this. No stress, Sylvia, but here's to the animation. I look forward to seeing it. Thank you.
Cheers, everyone. Thank you for joining us today.
Cheers.
Congratulations. Take care. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye all.